NATCRIM database is an aggregation of data from various sources. So in the screening industry, we have what's called primary sources and secondary sources. A database is considered a secondary source because the information is not considered live and up to date. It's database information that may get updated sometimes daily, sometimes weekly or monthly. And a NATCRIM database most often includes criminal record information. It may be county court or jail information. Outstanding warrants at the county level may be included. It'll also include state level sex offender information. And then there may also be kind of what we call global watches and sanctions. So different sort of government enforcement and debarment lists will be included. So it's really valuable from the perspective of covering a wide range of sources. And the reason we call it a NATCRIM or National Criminal is they tend to be sources that span, the entire US. It is a US-based source. Now, the challenge is that it's not comprehensive, so it is not considered a federal source. You wouldn't refer to it that way, but it does cover a lot of data in a lot of jurisdictions from a lot of different sources across the US. So when we talk about criminal record check or background information in general, we always want very specific details, very specific information. The NATCRIM database casts what we call a wide net. So it's a mile wide, but an inch deep, meaning that it covers, as I said, a lot of different sources across a lot of different jurisdictions, but there isn't the same level of detail that you would have if you checked a specific county. Now, one of the benefits, of course, is that the way criminal records typically work in the US is it's based on where an individual has resided. So it doesn't contemplate the individual who lives in Detroit, Michigan, and happens to go to Daytona for spring break and run into some criminal issues there. The NATCRIM database could potentially find that record because when you run a background check, you wouldn't necessarily know to check Daytona and the county where Daytona falls, but you would check the Detroit jurisdiction where they've lived. So that's probably the single biggest value. The other thing is that it does cover sources like a sex offender search, where the individual may be registered outside of their normal jurisdiction. And of course, the inclusion of government watches and sanctions. This is one of the only reasons that you would check it, one of the only sources you would be able to access that information. So one of the biggest pitfalls is that it is data banked information. So it relies on regular and consistent updates. Oftentimes the information that comes through in that update is not complete and accurate. Under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the FCRA, we have an obligation as PlusOne, as a consumer reporting agency, to report up-to-date and complete information. This is, as I mentioned earlier, why a NATCRIM database is considered secondary information, is it could be missing details. The challenge is it's really best as a pointer search. So if something comes up in the NATCRIM database, it will point you to another search that needs to be done. So for example, if a record comes up in Orange County, you may not have the complete disposition or sentencing information, but you will have enough information to go back to Orange County directly as the primary source and get those missing details. So probably the best way to do it is not have this be your only search. So oftentimes what we do with customers is we include the search, as we said, throw that wide net out there, but don't do this to the exclusion of a pinpointed search. So, continuing to run maybe a county criminal search in all jurisdictions where they've lived over a 7-year period, and then add on top of it a NATCRIM database search. Unfortunately, in the industry and for a lot of organizations, because a NATCRIM database search is an instantaneous search, some will just run it. It's, quick and cheap, and we like to think a little bit dirty, and that's all they'll do. But it isn't comprehensive enough. It's a false sense of security, and it's much better to copy that with or pair that with a direct county criminal source search. So The reason this is used as a pointer search is it's often very difficult to verify the information at the database level. So if a record comes up, you really need to go back to the primary source of where that information came from. So the way most of the NATCRIM databases work, that is information that's provided back to you. So you would go to that specific jurisdiction or direct source and do a much more specific search with the individual's identifiers at that source directly and see if a record comes up. Things could have changed since the database was updated. As I said before, the record may be incomplete, and that's the best way to make sure that any indication you get on a NATCRIM database is something that should actually be part of the background screening, and then you can determine if it's going to have any impact.